Blog Talk Radio.
Hey everyone, this is Brian Trumbull with Shooting the Shiznit. This is episode 5, season 3, and what we're just waiting for just a few seconds to get our guest on the line. And what we're going to do, just want to tell everyone about Cool Kids. It's a Cool Kids Wrestling and MMA Facebook group. If you're not a member, just do a search. We'll okay you and put you in there. Yeah, we're not politically correct, and we are not G-rated. So if you're a kiddo, we don't want you in there. I've got my guest on the line. I'm going to go ahead and bring him on. Give me just 1 second. Bring it on. Welcome, Blue Meanie, to Shooting the Shiznit. How you doing tonight, brother?
That's a great name for a show, man. Shooting the Shiznit.
Well, you know,
what's going on?
Here's the deal. Blue Meanie is actually on a podcast. He didn't even know what the name of it was before he got on it. And we don't want to. What we're going to do something different, because most podcasts would probably bring you on and we would talk about ECW or talk about JBL, which has always been a subject for you or about you. We're doing a little different on this podcast. I like to talk about fandom.
Sure.
How we become how people become fans of the business and what they did by listening to Tom Robinson on a episode of 605 podcast. He made the mention that you were part of the Rasslin Radio group that came from Philadelphia and then did the tour of Memphis. I really thought that maybe we were on the same tour together. I still cannot figure out. I told you I'm horrible when it comes to dates. I looked up some of my newsletters. Yeah, I'm bad. I guess after you turn, I'm 50, so after you turn, 49, 48, you just lose all your memories. So,
yeah, pretty much.
But what I want to do
Same
is
here.
talk about well, I don't have any hair, so yeah. How you become, you took a fan of Rasslin Radio. Rasslin Radio was, when I was started with it, was Carmela Panfield and Joel Goodhart. And I would do the Memphis report every week. I would tell them about what was going on the show. And you were one of their listeners, right?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, it was on every Saturday morning, which was perfect because, you Saturday morning wrestling, you get up, listen to Rasslin Radio on WIP in Philadelphia, and then, watch your Saturday morning wrestling. So, I mean, it was perfect, especially something based in Philly, and I'm anything, successful or going on in Philly, I'm pro Philly, and I'm a Philly boy and stuff like that. So it just all made sense.
Right. And then Joel and Carmela both, especially Joel, was a huge Memphis wrestling fan. And if people are listening to it now and you're in a different age group than me and you are, people don't understand what we had to go through to get me. I was the Memphis guy. I was the one that supplied a lot of Memphis tapes to people. I got a VCR in 1980. It was the summer of 1985, and then started trading Memphis wrestling. But how were you able to watch? You were listening to reports that I did, but you also, how were you getting tapes and trading tapes and everything also?
Well, I didn't get into tape trading till way later, but I always recorded every week.
Right.
I recorded Saturday morning shows, and then, like I've told many a times, it's like I would just spend my Saturdays, flipping through or back in the day when newspapers were a thing, you can look at the TV guide and see what kind of, I would search hour by hour, is wrestling going to be on? And here's one that was a huge rib. I was a kid. I looked in the paper. It said Billy Graham revival, and I'm thinking superstar Billy Graham. And I'm waiting until like 11 o'clock at night, and I realized it was the preacher Billy Graham. So that was a big rib on me. So, but when it came to the Memphis stuff, some of it actually aired in the Philly. Well, I'm Philly, but I grew up in Jersey too, and when I lived in Atlantic City, we had a lot of channels that would get like random wrestling. We would get World Class, we would get Bill Watch UWF, and we got some Memphis too. I don't know how current it was to that time, but I would watch it almost every week, and then I'd always known about Memphis from the after mags and stuff like that, and kept up with storylines that way as well. But when it came to Rasslin Radio, I found that out from a friend I went to school with named Justin Rosanio, and he was a member, and a member of Square Circle Fan Club, but he smartened me up to it. And then I lived in Atlantic City, so the signal wasn't too strong. So what I would do is I would get a cable splitter, and back in the day you could carry radio signals through cable television. And I would do a cable splitter. I'd do one to the TV and then one and hook it up to my stereo so I could get all the Philly stations clear as a whistle. And that included the AM stations, which, WIP at that time was AM. Now it's FM. And that's how I listened to Joel Goodhart's Rasslin Radio every Saturday morning, was, just by MacGyvering my radio to hooked it up to the cable.
I did some channel. I always got Memphis Wrestling out of Channel 5, and we had one of those antennas where you had to go outside and turn it. I wasn't. We weren't rich. We didn't have the actual that had the motor on it, and you could turn it inside.
Right.
So in the middle of winter, I'd be out there trying to, and I'd be asking my mom, "Is it clear? Is it clear?" So that's. I had to do that, and did get
You almost had to have a walkie-talkie system.
It was horrible though. That was just, and people don't understand. The thing I love most about what we can do nowadays is that, is that we can watch almost anything we want to on YouTube. I've even spoken about this before here, was that I can watch Japanese wrestling while it's happening now, which was just a chore to get matches from Japan at one time. But that has really changed and gives everyone the opportunity. They don't understand. Like you just told me, everything you did just to hear the Rasslin Radio show, that the things that we went through just to watch our wrestling. So and the thing about it is we stayed strong as fans. That you'd think some of that would keep us from actually wanting to continue to be fans, but it seemed like, especially when VHS first started, I think that even made me a bigger fan. I was able to trade and see stuff from everywhere. So where you went to two tours in 90 and 91, and if you said you would guess August, and I would too, because if I remember the first one I went to, I think was about 3 years before that, and it was in the summer. So you went the first year.
It always seemed to be in the summer.
Right.
Yeah, it always seemed to be in the summer.
How did they do that? How did they arrange it on your end? Because I was on this end of it talking to and actually met tons of guys, because I still talk to a couple of the guys that are wrestlers now, because of Rasslin Radio introduced me. It was just really strange. I gave the tapes to a couple of the wrestlers so that they could listen to it, and we've been friends ever since. But how did it work on your end? You said Square Circle Fan Club. I can barely remember that, but you're right. They had a Square Circle Fan Club, right?
Yes, Square Circle Fan Club, and they would maybe a few months before the actual trip, they would advertise and stuff like that, and you would get your money, send it in, and they would go through whichever travel agency they were using. And I guess the cool part is, I guess the travel agent himself was a fan, so he'd come along on the trips as well. You would show up to the airport, there'd be Joel, he'd give you your airline ticket, and, it was weird for me. I lived in Atlantic City, so I didn't drive at the time, and nobody in my family drives, so I took this thing called a Rapid Rover, which was basically an airline shuttle, which would pick you up and, drive you any amount of miles. I lived in Atlantic City, so it would drive me from Atlantic City to the Philadelphia airport, and we'd pick up people along the way. It was like a shuttle bus. So I would have to do that, meet the group at the airport, get my tickets, and then back then, I think we flew on it. It was either Southwest. No, it might have been Northwest. I know it's an airline that's no longer around, but it was cool. It was like one of my second times on a plane ever, you know. And well, the hard part was, you know, convincing my grandparents this was something that was on the up and up. But you know, I had my friend Justin, who was also going on a trip, so he vouched for it. And you know, my grandparents were, you know, very protective and stuff like that. But we went and did that, and then once you get there, you check in, and then that night we would have the meet and greet, you know, the welcoming dinner or get together with Dave Brown, who was the announcer for Channel 5. He was the Channel 5 weatherman, as everybody knew, but he was also the play-by-play announcer for Memphis Wrestling, and he would bring us up to speed on all the angles, and please cheer the baby faces. Please don't boo the heels, because they knew we were from Philly. And please don't hurt our angles. Yeah. And, and then we would ask, you know, what's been going on, and he would give us the lowdown. So the next morning we go to the Channel 5 studios, we were pretty much brought up to speed on, you know, where everybody was on the card and stuff like that. So it's really neat, you know. To think back, you know, all these years later, and think back to how it was, it's like it's insane. You know, it's just you don't really see people doing that these days, except for maybe like WrestleMania Access. But you know, this is just Memphis. You know, and we were just doing the house show loops and stuff like that.
Yeah, it was fun. Yeah. We actually did one later on. I had one friend from Chicago and one from New York where we did the whole. Now, did you guys stay the whole week? I can't remember how long y'all were on that bus.
We would come in on, I want to say Friday morning, get to the hotel, hang around, probably go to the pool, mess around, you know, go swimming or whatever, and then we'd get together around like 5 or 6 for the Dave Brown meet and greet, and then he'd give us the lowdown, and then we'd go have some dinner. They would have like, you know, the basic, you know, food over sternos and stuff like that, like a buffet style, whatever.
Right.
Every morning we would have breakfast at the hotel too, and every morning we had breakfast with different wrestlers. So like one morning we had breakfast with Eric Embry and Tom Pritchard, and then eventually the last breakfast was always like Lawler. And then the one year, the last year I did it, which was 91, Eddie Gilbert just showed up out of nowhere. Like, if you could say it was like if there was ever a run-in on a breakfast, it was Eddie Gilbert kind of just doing a run-in on our breakfast and talked to almost politics to Jerry in front of us about getting his job back for Memphis, which is kind of funny. And so,
oh, wow. You're saying he wasn't even in the area at the time. He just walks in and you know, Eddie was good. He was a fan, number one. He was a huge
Absolutely.
fan of the business, and would well known, been documented before that he would make up his own wrestling cards and do his own booking way before he was old enough to even, and probably would have been. He was good when I was a fan of his booking, but he always wanted to be the king, and so this tells you Lawler's still the king in Memphis area. So that was never going to happen, didn't happen, and never would. But he was a fan. He came to one of our other conventions and just hung out with us, him and Heyman at the time, and Missy Hyatt, and they just had as much fun as we did, And that was you talking about having the breakfast. I remember having breakfast and then having. I think we had breakfast one morning on one of the tours I was on with Travis and Jeff Jarrett and Billy Travis at the time.
Okay. Yeah.
And they were really open with us about various things. They didn't kayfabe us at all. Well, a little bit, but not much. I mean, they, were Tom Pritchard and Embry, did they know y'all were kind of the smart crew, or smarter than than the average fan?
Oh yeah, they definitely knew we were. They definitely knew we were smart, and they were very just chill, just very relaxed. I don't remember too much of like all we talked about, but we'd always get Dr. Tom to do his Roddy Piper impersonation and stuff like that, and I kind of got my first lesson in wrestling of how you think everybody thinks people like each other, oh, they're all friends in the wrestling business.
Right, yeah.
And I got a cold shot of reality when I was talking to Eric Embry. I'm sitting there. I remember seeing Eric Embry do a shot on like AWA with Ken Timms. They were like, I want to say the Hollywood Blondes, but it was something along those lines. I thought they were breaking out. And I was trying to break the ice, like hey, I liked your work with Ken Timms, and I thought he would like go, oh well, funny you mentioned that, blah 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 blah. And so I was like, oh, maybe sometimes I'm a little bit of a mumble mouth. So, a little bit goes by, and I was like, yeah, that stuff you did with Ken Timms was pretty cool. And you could tell he's like, if I was bad at picking up vibes, but eventually he's like, Ken Timms is a liar and a thief. And I went, whoa, shit. I started powdering and backing up, like, doing the Ric Flair. Oh, no. I was like, oh, I'm so sorry. I didn't know. He's like, nah, it's all right. It's all right. But, it is what it is. And that's like kind of pulled the curtain back to, like, even guys who are supposed to like each other in tag teams probably really don't like each other.
Right, yeah. I got something similar where I would be talking to one guy like Lawler, and he would be so excited because he was booking, and you would have some guy, typical Dundee sitting in there, agreeing with everything Lawler said, and then when you would Dundee would be somewhere, he'd go, man, that one stuff that was the shit, that was horrible, and I was just like, okay, and I even, I heard people criticizing. To me, still to this day, Lance Russell is a god to me. He was the guy I grew up listening to and watching, and so I started watching when I was in '78, and from that point on, he was until I started trading tapes in '85. So you're looking at all those years. He was that was the main place I watched was Memphis because we didn't have cable, and to hear the wrestlers say, Lance, he just didn't do a good job putting me over. He didn't do this and didn't do that. That was just like to me going, my God, they'll stab anyone in the back. They'll stab Lance Russell in the back. Come on.
Yeah, Lance Russell, like one the gods of announcing. I mean, you wouldn't expect to hear that from anybody. Imagine somebody in Florida going, well, that Gordon Soley, man, Jesus Christ. Or something like that, but
right.
That would,
and I was just like,
that would.
Yeah, I looked strange.
That would totally
throw
me off.
Yeah, because I didn't, and it's various things that when you start getting around and getting exposed to various things in the business, it's not what, but what you thought it was, kind of thing. But then you got to remember with especially with the Memphis wrestling with me. Was I grew up, like I said, watching it, but not only me, but that whole area that I lived in. I lived in Missouri, but you have Missouri, Arkansas, and Tennessee, and you had 3 out of 4 people almost watching that show. So we all grew up. It was almost like we were watching, like I watched Gilligan's Island and Bewitched and all that, and the Munsters in the afternoons. But really, when I started meeting those guys, it was like I was meeting these TV stars that that were just that came out of the shell and weren't exactly what I thought they were. But it was just really weird because here I was hanging out with Gilligan. Really, I was hanging out with Lawler or somebody like that. But that's the way I felt. I was just like, wow, here because they were. I mean, no one, and even to this day, but no one, talked about, maybe the $6 Million Man or something like that. But the main thing is every kid, my age growing up that wanted to be Jerry Lawler, or Bill Dundee or Handsome Jimmy Valiant. So that was, and you got a guy like you. Now, when you went to Memphis, who were the guys that you watched in the ring, or you seen that said, hey, I'm going to be a fan of these guys from now? Or, was there any time then that you seen someone that you were young then? You were like 17 or 18, right?
Yeah. It was well, actually maybe a little bit younger than that. I went the summer after my freshman year in high school, and then I went the summer after my sophomore year. So
right.
I might have been a little bit younger than that. I might have been a little bit younger than that, but I mean, God, I got getting to see. The first time around, Lawler was working there, so I got to watch. I mean, Gilbert was still working, and then the next year he was off. But I got to watch Eddie Gilbert work Bill Dundee. I got to see the one of the year, I believe 91. There was a young Chris Candido down there. I got to watch Dr. Tom wrestle. And at the time, there was I believe it was Jarrett and maybe Billy Travis were feuding with a tag team called the Barroom Brawlers, which was Doug Vines, and I forget who the other guy was. And every night they were like doing this street fight. It was almost like ECW-esque, where they would actually set up a bar room in the ring, like, a fake bar with bar stools, stuff like that, and they would go in there in their street gear, boots and jeans and knee pads, and just brawl all over the building, which was like kind of like a precursor to, ECW. So
yeah, that's crazy.
Those matches were always exciting, and to see them do them around the loop, which is actually pretty cool,
That's what I like most about what we did, is that we were able to see it was a weekly show that did every week. They went to X amount of towns. You were always in Nashville, Memphis, Evansville, and Louisville every week, and then you do a spot in on Friday nights. They'd sometimes split the crew up, and I don't know where the rest of the crew would, but you would have them in Blytheville, Arkansas, which was about 15 minutes from me, and that's where I went to my first show. So it was that whole loop where they would and just draw a crowd. A little small building, with almost 2,000 people I've seen, just for people to see Eddie Gilbert against Jerry Lawler, and just crazy fans that would pay their money, $5 back then, but I guess that was a lot more money, worth a lot more then.
Right.
But just, I remember Eddie Marlin telling me back in the day kind of thing that they did the same program for almost a year. And drew good, it was a tag team program, and they almost went 52 weeks. I think you said 48, and they did good gate there in Jonesboro for every one of them, which was totally different. Now, you mentioned Candido, but was there a guy that you met during the crew during the trip that you was there, that was on the crew, that you was able to work down the road or become friends with, or something like that? Who would you pick from that crew there that you in? They were USWA then, right?
It was definitely USWA then, and
right.
I'm trying to think. That's a good question, because I guess the one person I would have to say is Dr. Tom Pritchard, but we never actually got to formally wrestle each other. We always, like when I first went into ECW, ECW was using the Heavenly Bodies, and then when he went to WWE, I went to WWE. And then, he was a producer and a trainer. And then they had me do one of the Dory Funk and Dojos. And it was him and Dory Funk running the dojos. So I got to meet him as a fan during the Memphis loops, got to have breakfast with him and all that stuff. And then once I got into the business, I got to work with him in ECW as far as being on shows with him. And then I got to work with him in WWE as far as him being a producer, and then he actually, helped with some of the training I did there. And he's still somebody I consider a friend to this day. He's
That's
one,
awesome.
underrated talents and minds in the business, and a lot of people could point to Dr. Tom and point out, where they worked with him and he gave advice and stuff like that, and so out of that whole Memphis experience, well then Candido was on those loops, and then in ECW I got to work Candido. Me and Nova wrestled Candido and Lance Storm a couple times, and then and that was about it. He was in WWE when I got there, but probably if. Oh, and then of course Jerry Lawler and Jeff Jarrett. I mean, they were on those loops, and then later on I got to work with Jeff Jarrett in WWE, and Jerry Lawler did a surprise appearance in ECW, and then once he went to WWE and became an announcer, he I got to work with him there. So the more I talk, the more I start to remember. So
how many guys? Yeah, they had such a. I mean, if you just go back and look at those guys from the start to the start opening match, you would look at some of those old Memphis shows and you would go, guys that were Danny Davis that went on to do the Nightmares and everything, guys like that, and Bobby Eaton, and they just had a hell of a crew and did and worked from usually had a really good show from point A to point to the end. They just had, and the spot shows were fun too. So that had to be the thing about it is that's cool about what. And when I found out you were I really like, not that I hold anything against anyone that become a big star because they weren't a wrestling fan. I love it that someone is a wrestling fan and are able to, live out their dream. No matter what kind of fan you are, if you're telling me I started as a 10-year-old kid and I want to be a basketball player, that just, it's a big deal to me. It's like, hey, I lived, I got to manage in this area, nothing major. I was, not a big deal, but I got to live out, just a little bit of my, you wrestled some of these people that you went on a fan trip with. So that is just so
it was, and then go on top of that, every year we would play softball against Jerry Lawler's team.
Oh yes, and then who was the guy that put up his hair every time? I can't remember his name. Do you remember that?
That was Fran Elmsley. Not Emsley. Fran Elmsley. I think we're still friends on Facebook, but
oh my God, yeah, he lost his hair every year.
Every year we would do the Monday morning, the Saturday morning wrestling taping at the Memphis studio, and then we drive a couple hours. I believe it was like Camden, Tennessee, or something like that, or something out towards somewhere in between Memphis and Nashville, and then we would play softball.
Yeah, plays there and then go to the national.
And we would always do the job. We would always do the job to Jerry's team, and then for every year, Franny would put his hair up, and every year Franny got his head shaved sitting on home plate.
Yeah, it's true. All right, here we go. I hate to do this, but we got 90 seconds. I'm trying to make this a 30-minute or so. I won't waste anyone's time, and they'll sit through it. So we got about 90 seconds. What I want you to do is tell us your Twitter handle. I want you to plug anything you got, which you just came out with an action figure, which I still think is one of the coolest things ever. But they did a really good job. Some of them is not as good as yours, but, man, they did a really good job with yours. You got so go ahead.
Get my wrestling
plug
figure.
Everything.
Yeah, you get my wrestling figure at WrestlingSuperstore.com. If you want a BWO shirt, go to ProWrestlingTees.com/Blue Meanie. I got several shirts in there you can buy, several sizes. Follow me on Twitter at Blue Meanie BWO, and the same for Instagram, and then Facebook. I'm under my real name, Brian.Heffron. So that's all the ways you can follow me in my meaniness.
Hey, man, I thank you a lot. I appreciate it. I want to thank everyone that's listening tonight. I had a great time. It's so like I said,
thanks for having
make
me.
it a little something different and probably some different stuff coming out of you that people haven't heard. So
it was a blast, man. I'm still a fan.
All right. Thanks a lot.
Have a great night. Thank you so much.
Fashion Emergency Hotline.
Help! My kids just gave me an executive order for President's Day. New clothes now.
Just run to Old Navy.
Old Navy?
Yep. Right now, get up to 50% off store-wide and at OldNavy.com through President's Day.
Up to 50% off? I vote for that.
Me too. And right now, jeans start at $15 for adults, $12 for kids. And tees start at $7 for adults, $5 for kids.
$5 tees and jeans on sale? This is huge. I'm headed to Old Navy now. Thanks.
Don't thank me. Thank Old Navy. Valid 2/13 through 2/20. Select styles only.
Did you start your degree but never finish it? Now you can. Kaplan University has scholarships to help you save on your degree. Save up to $4,000 on your associates or save up to $6,000 on your bachelor's. These are scholarships, not loans. You won't have to pay them back. Visit savings.kaplan.edu today for details. That's savings.kaplan.edu. Terms and conditions apply. Visit kaplan.edu/info for complete consumer and gainful employment information.